Hey gang, it's KR King of D&D Homebrew talking today about engaging your players in some kind of legal dispute in your world. Because if you have sentient creatures in a world, you're creating a sandbox world with cities and settlements, even if it's super crude, even if you're in some sort of almost pre-civilized or just civilized world, they're going to have rules and strictures. They're going to have laws of some kind. And they're going to have some way to adjudicate disputes between parties, sort of civil law, and to punish offenders, criminal law, things like murder, like theft, in a more sophisticated world, fraud, treason, the crimes against the state or crimes against individuals. And you can play this with your players. The reason this came out, I just did one last week in the campaign I'm running, the Pathfinder. One of the players seemed to enjoy it. And I've always done these over the years, but you have to be careful here. Because let's say a fantasy RPG, although this could be sci-fi RPG, any kind, any place where there's a society with rules. But you don't want to overdo it. It's not a game about that. But it does give your world verisimilitude where there are consequences for what the players do. And of course, this is our first rule on this, as it were. The players must be the ones to instigate these disputes, these actions, right? They are the ones, they are the protagonists and antagonists of the world, and they're going to cause other sentient humanoids who are in the settlements and, cities of their world to have a dispute to, I am suing you, or I am, the state says you have murdered these people and you're going to go to trial. It should not just come out of the blue. You go into a town and they arrest you on a pretext and now we're going to have a trial. I mean, you can do that if you've said, if you go into that town, they might arrest you on a pretext. But ordinarily what you want to do is say that you did X, the players, and so now the authorities of city Y, have a beef with you. If you go there, they're going to arrest you. Or they're going to go through some procedure, because it isn't always arresting you. But, they're going to go through some procedure where either the state or some individual wants their redress, right? They're accusing you of some transgression against their community. And this follows up with the second rule, which is the players should be appropriate level to have this kind of dispute. A first level character hasn't interacted with the world enough to cause some kind of dispute such that there's going to be civil proceedings or legal action, right? You don't want to have stuff that happened before the game. So the first level players are running, just kind of going through their thing. If you suddenly say, they put you under arrest in session 2 for something, it's just a little soon. It's just they haven't made that much impact in the world. So it will flow naturally when you think about this. They get to third level, let's say fourth level, they start to do things and they're going to start to bump up against people. They're going to get into a fight, let's say, with someone, operatives of some gang, let's say, and they kill them. And this gang, if they have influence, may convince the authorities that, hey, these guys were murdered. And the state has an interest in preventing people from murdering, as I've talked about with murder hobos. You do that, the state's going to, whether it's a king, his lieutenants, his guard, they're going to hunt you down. Nobles, some city that has some kind of council, it's a proto-democracy, they're going to get you. And this is the thing about a trial situation. It isn't that they go out, get you, hang you from the nearest tree, although there are cultures like that. We're saying this culture, they bring you back, and in front of the community, they say, these individuals murdered these people, stole from these people, committed treason against the king. Now they're going to be punished, but they get a chance to defend themselves, right? This is a communal event. It may be a sham trial, as we'll see, but there must be formalities that are honored. And again, at the high levels, when the players get to 9th, 10th, 11th, whatever, the idea that a magistrate's going to come and arrest them, and throw them in the city jail, it doesn't hold that much water. The players have tons of renown at this point. There are not that many. I mean, unless you've got 15th or 20th level NPCs, they're very powerful. And disputes are going to be settled in a more upper level, secret meetings and this kind of thing, and negotiating, okay, you murdered this person, they want to murder this, the old sort of mafioso thing. If you play that kind of game, or simply, we want you to do something for us, informally, but really it is formally because they don't want, and the players have to do a quest or something like that. But it isn't sort of a public trial situation. So again, you want that level appropriate situation. What this also does is prevents too many of these because you don't want too many. I might do one per campaign or something like that. And again, it has to, since it grows out of the activities of the players, maybe they're just constantly doing stuff against the state. You can have players that want to be outlaws. They commit crimes, the city's after them, and they just run away, and they're on the run. They go to another town, they just do this. Now, again, as I said with the murder hobo thing, it doesn't last long. It's much better to confront this head on and figure a way out of it or some way to negotiate it or whatever. Because if you're an outlaw, you lose the support of all these settlements. You're truly on your own. So I'm going to present two examples of this that I've actually run recently. One was a criminal trial. The players were on trial for murder. And the second is a civil case, a hearing that the players did just this week on a charter for some land. So in the criminal case, the players confronted these basically bandits, killed them, and the people that hired these bandits were powerful figures and decided to press them on these murder, say they murdered those guys. There was no reason for them to fight. So the players had to decide what they were going to do. They had heard, they'd been contacted by their various people in the city, and they said there's going to be basically a trial. What I do is, again, this is proto-democracy, again, a fantasy RPG, more of a tribunal in the sort of Roman sense, right? The authorities line up, you have an advocate, the state has an advocate, they go to the tribunal, then they decide. And, this is not a formal, quality of evidence. You're not appealing. Maybe you can appeal to the king, but it's a proto sort of trial situation. Now, one thing I always do is I have an advocate for the state or opposing party, and that advocate is a silver-tongued lawyer type. The guy that was just, I had this person, Slezak, was the attorney for the opposing side in this hearing over a land charter last week. And they have all sorts of evidence. A lot of times they've done research on the players. You bring up various activities that have occurred over the campaign and put them in a negative light. And they do all sorts of stuff to win the case. And they're very able, and they're a good opponent. I don't usually have someone who's an idiot. All right, the next thing is to make sure you keep this legal proceeding kind of in a limited thing. You don't want to take a 3-hour session to do this. Maybe if it's the epic thing of your campaign, but I don't think that should be in a legal setting. So you want to make sure you get there, you do the niceties, and then you present the case, and then there's a decision made relatively quickly. You allow the players to take as long as they want to present their case if they're into it, but you don't need to stretch this out. Now, on the opposite side of this advocate for the court, you always have the players defend themselves. Even though in the real world, if you do that, you have a fool for an attorney. In an RPG setting, you don't want them to just be sitting there watching you as the GM argue back and forth. They have to present their case. They have to defend themselves. You can have an advisor who just says, okay, this is how the court works. This is how this system works. Again, you want to keep this as short as possible. So, for example, in this murder case, the advocate worked for this basic crime family who the players, but very entrenched in the society. They have a respectable side. And this advocate, basically, these men were killed. They're widows and children that are, don't have a father. And these, it was a totally merited killing. And these people should be, severely punished, put in prison or worse. And the players then turned around and defended themselves. The clearly laying out the case that these bandits had instigated this action. And there was a hothead in the party who was very notorious for making mistakes. And I had my advocate demand that this person speak to the council, at the tribunal. And this player got up and gave a very impassioned speech about holding up the rights of people against these bandits, against the thugs of this crime family. And in many ways, even if they were sacrificed upon this, it was worth it because they finally had stood up. It was very impressive. The other element here is I did not put the players in jail or force them to pay a bond or anything like that. You can do that if a super serious crime, but one, the players were at the level where they had some renown. It was known if they fled this, they would not be allowed back. Now they would be considered guilty if they fled. So that's a whole nother thing. They had a reasonable thought that they could argue their case. They had sympathetic people in this tribunal. So I did not set up a thing where they're all in a jail cell. You know, if the players kill a monarch or something like that, you can do that kind of thing. But again, in this situation, I had them come to this tribunal. They wanted to clear their names, so I did not hold them in jail. Now, the other thing that you can do as the players are arguing this is to have the advocate get up and make like a surprise witness. Some individual from the player's running history who's clearly been paid off to testify against them or make some outlandish claim or whatever. Again, you're adding the humor element. Also, the player's like, what? You know, and then they got to defend themselves. So you're thinking about, you're not taking this too long, but you're thinking of the twists and turns. The advocate gives their case. The players make a defense. The advocate then gets up and says, let's talk to the old lady, that, you know, whatever. The players have to respond. If you have a representative from the state advising them, you can tell them they can have witnesses that get up and talk to them. And in this criminal case, that's what the players did. They brought someone in from this rest stop that had been there, a worker, to say what they saw, what happened, right? And what happened when they had a bunch of witnesses, a lot of them were paid off. But one of the players made an impassioned plea. This is before the trial. They realized my witnesses are going away, right? Classic jury tampering or whatever, case tampering. But they managed to find this person and convince them to do it. And again, they were into this as it developed and they saw what was happening. And they saw that it sort of made sense in a fantasy RPG setting that I had created. They got into it. They got into defending themselves because they also saw it as an opportunity to expose the corruption of this family, a public forum. The leaders of the community were this tribunal. So they had the surprise witness. The players buffeted that. They made this impassioned speech. But they also knew beforehand, the way tribunals often work, they were going to be found guilty. It just depended on what the penalty was. They knew that if they gave an impassioned defense, they knew they were members of the council, and they had the public. One of their insistences was to have a representation of the public there. Right. And so people were interested. And by this time they had a little renown, and it was known they were taking on this crime family. So people were interested. They had the case. They were found guilty. The prosecutor, the crime family was demanding that they be executed or imprisoned on, galleys on the ships. But instead they fined them $5,000, which is a lot of money, a lot of gold piece, 5,000 gold. But then all these citizens, the player that made the impassioned speech said, we will, because they're going to go to like debtor's prison. All these citizens then volunteered to pay this fine, which was a further insult to this crime family. So that worked out for the players. Again, they did it all. They instigated the issue and then they defended themselves. And it turned out okay. The other case I'm going to mention is a civil case that I just ran, which was the charter for a plot of land that had been given by the king, the authorities. It's a council kind of structure. We have nobles. To this individual to run this rest stop and have this land. He was, his place was destroyed. The players had everything to do with this, right? So this, again, these kind of shady operators said, hey, we want the charter. We'll build a fortress there. We'll make the road better. We'll do these improvements. We're going to do mining. And they were going to have a hearing. Well, the players said, we want to be in on that hearing because we don't want these people to get this. So they were there. Just a city, they went, I just said, okay, they talk about this, the roads, the wharf, this battle, here's an honorary citizen thing, all the things that city councils do. And then the question of the charter for this area came up. And instead of being a routine thing, again, I had my advocate, Slezak, give his reasons. The players then were going to say, no, they shouldn't get this for these reasons. But here's what I did. The night before, a representative of this family, this kind of slinky operator named Vesper, she invited them to this fine restaurant, and she's plying them with wine and food and saying, we'll make you part of this new venture. If you testify for us tomorrow, you can get rich off this. And they were tempted. Because these people, they even though they're, underhanded and everything, I love those types, right, in my world, they also are very known to, if they make a a deal like lawful neutral, they stick to it. And so they were going to do well. So when they got into the courtroom, the Slezak guy, the advocate for this thing, had them sit in the front row, and talk. They also noticed over here this wife of this guy that ran this rest area, was really bitter, was there also in the front row, all dressed in fine clothes. Someone had bought her off, right? So when the players said, nope, we don't think they should have it and whatever, we should, and they explained their thoughts on this to this council, who were all like given a great deal. They're going to get 20%, the 5 ruling families, all 20% share of this, basically split equally. It was a good deal for them. But the players got up there, they made their argument about what was going on and what these people were up to. So then the advocate gave all his evidence of all the sleazy things the players had been doing, which was all trumped up and, twisted. Then brought out the wife who gave a whole story, and they cross-examined her. Then they made a petition to the various families. They had done their research, and each one they talked about what this might get for you, especially the family of kind of the workers, the people that were actually going to build it, because they were going to go out in this deadly area and probably a lot of them would get killed, but they were offering them a high pay. So in the end, what happened, they had a vote, and they did basically a delay on the vote for more consideration. Privately, they said, we want you to go out and do some more work. It's a long story, as these things are, into this area and find these people that live there to come out. We're going to do all this stuff because there are forces in this world that don't want this crime group to succeed. And afterwards, the players said, that was great. They said to me, at one point when he pulled out the wife thing, we were like, oh no. And they had to make some rolls, and they had a big roll based on, their social skills, a Pathfinder system. They made those rolls. There were some opposed rolls between them and the advocate and all this kind of stuff. But they prevailed. And it took about an hour, which is, just fine for a role-playing situation. And in both of these cases, you have the judges go off to make their decision, and the players are waiting to see what happens. And it wasn't clear in either case that they were necessarily going to win. They knew in the first one they were going to lose. It had been organized, this tribunal situation. The family structure they were too powerful. They had to have some form of redress for their employees that got killed. Just what would be the punishment? And it turned into a fine. But in the other one, they had no idea what was going to happen. So there's tension there. They're waiting. And then, of course, think of the tension you see in courtrooms. Famous cases where the jury comes back in and everyone's watching, and then they make their announcement of their verdict. It's cool, and you can have that in your campaign. I think, again, if you follow those strictures, keep it short. Make sure that the players know exactly what's going on. You don't need to necessarily imprison them. They can run away if they want. I always let them run away. Unless it's some really ridiculous thing. They go in and stab the king and are arrested. Well, they're going to be in jail, right? But in a lot of this stuff, it's not the case. And then we have a chance for them to defend themselves. You can go the route, too, maybe you're in a campaign where, if you got an 18 charisma or something, or you've got, all these skills in persuasion and stuff. Oh, it's a breeze. You can do that. But I prefer to have someone against them who's good like that. So they got to think. They got to come up with something that person didn't think of. They got to, get them off their feet a little bit. And this can be really fun because it's a contest of wits. It's another way to have conflict, right, in your world. It isn't just hack and slash. And the results of this are very helpful to the players. The criminal trial, when the players came out into the main courtyard, they were cheered as heroes. They had actually taken on this crime family and won. Now, the one that just happened this week, it's still unresolved, so we'll see what happens. The players felt pretty good about it. But, of course, I always know there's a few, hidden things. I'm not going to say because they watch this now, but there's going to be some other twists and turns, right? And that's also what happens when you're dealing with sentient creatures in a community such that you do have laws. You do have rituals. You do have traditions that must be honored. In a crude society, it might just be a battle to the death to decide who wins or something like that. But they're going to settle disputes. They can't let them simmer. They have to settle the dispute, and then whatever happens, shake hands or bygones be by or whatever it is, because we got to keep moving forward in our society, but we need to settle these disputes. And a shout out to all my Patreon supporters, guys. I really appreciate the help you're doing to keep this content on this channel going. And if you like what you've seen on my channel, please subscribe, leave a comment, tell me what you think about, the courtroom drama in an RPG setting. But most importantly, keep playing an RPG, whichever one you choose, and tell somebody else about it.